Hey y'all, welcome to Momageddon, the show where my best friend and I talk about our attempt to navigate life as moms, neurodivergent disasters, and generally exhausted human beings just trying to keep our shit together.
So, why this podcast? Well, we realize that there are so many of us out here moms, caregivers, disabled folks, neurodivergent people who are just out here trying to make it, and no one really gives us a handbook for how to survive when society wasn't exactly built with us in mind. So, we figured, why not talk about it? Why not share our stories, our struggles, our wins, our absolute fucking disasters? Why not make it a party?
This is definitely a space place where we can be real, be messy, and most importantly, know that we're not alone in this. So grab a drink, find a comfy spot, and get ready to laugh, cry, and maybe even learn something weirdly fascinating along the way.
All right, let's fucking do this. Okay, welcome back to Momageddon. Today, we're going to be pulling skeletons out of history's closet, and they're going to be clutching some unpaid medical bills.
I'm Jess, your co host, along on this ride.
And I'm Z, and I'll be helping through humanity's charming habit of fucking over disabled people, people with uteruses, and minorities for, I don't know, the past 5,000 years.
Right?
Right. So, today, we're going to be discussing something that is like super important to Jess and I, which is disabilities.
Yes.
I figured I would kind of start us out where it all began, the ancient times, where mercy and science did not exist. So, to really start off, we're going to have to go all the way back to ancient Egypt, 3000 BCE.
Oof.
So, believe it or not, Egypt kind of had a better attitude than later civilization. They portrayed people with dwarfism, blindness, and other physical disabilities in art. And they even had them in roles as like priests and leaders. It's super progressive, right?
It is. And you know what? They don't teach you that shit in school. Like it's not talked about when I was in school.
Well, don't give them too much credit.
Okay.
Unless you had epilepsy. Th- then you were a curse carrier of the dark forces. So it's a whole mixed bag. Moving on to ancient Greece, which was around 400 BCE, where you had Plato and Aristotle. They were these philosophers who lots of people admire. You may have heard them be quoted as those people who said only the strong should survive.
Yeah.
That that was actually in regards to disabled infants.
Wow.
So they believed that if your newborn didn't meet standards, off the cliff you went.
Nice. Eat the
Tough,
child.
tough crowd.
Yeah.
Moving on to 500 to 1500 CE, which is about the Middle Ages. This is kind of whenever you start getting into disabilities being, of course, demon possessions.
Of course.
So if you had things like seizures, schizophrenia, severe depression during medieval Europe, congratulations, now possessed by a demon.
Awesome.
And you can go ahead and assume that this would be targeted towards mostly people with uteruses, especially people who are in poverty. And those people would be often scapegoated. There was this witch hunting guide published in 1487 called the Malleus Maleficarium. And it warned that women were weaker in faith and prone to witchcraft because of their, and I'm so sorry, and I hate to use this word, because of their moist, soft bodies.
They're moist. It's
Yeah.
moist.
Ugh, God. So basically, they said soggy women equals evil,
Okay.
which
I
is
wonder
super.
what does soggy mean when it comes to a woman? Like, do you walk up and like squish them?
Well, in the Middle Ages, it meant that they were prone to witchcraft and weaker in faith. Super, super devastating for people with uteruses because tens of thousands of women were tortured and killed for symptoms that we now know as disabilities like epilepsy, bipolar disorder, autism, and just not liking their husbands, which, if you ask me, is probably a high IQ level. Good job, humanity.
Always.
Moving on to one of my favorite eras, which is the Enlightenment era. It's like the 1500s to the 1700s, where they were super light on science and super heavy on locking people up. This is in like 1656. So France opens up this place called Hospital General.
Okay.
It wasn't a hospital.
Of course.
It was a warehouse for anyone society found undesirable. So if you were poor, disabled, um, a single mother, yeah, into the junk drawer you went. Uh,
Nice.
no consent.
Of course not.
And then in that same year, England had poor laws, and they decided that disabled people were public nuisances and not citizens, so they could be imprisoned and starved.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
Um, at this point, diagnoses were like throwing darts blindfolded. They didn't know if it was melancholy or demon infestation. The humors were fucked up. So, of course, they didn't know what practices to try in order to help, right? So,
Personally vote for demon infestation, but that's just me.
yeah, but how do you treat a demon infestation? Bloodletting or prayer?
I, again, just my take. Let them go.
Spoiler alert, neither. Neither is going
Great.
to work. So, moving on into the era of scientific racism and sexism, which is the 1800s. Jess, I don't know about you, but have you ever gone into a doctor and said, "Hey, I have this thing that's happening," and the doctor made you feel like maybe you're making it up?
Of course I have.
Wow, me too. Well, in the 1840s to the 1860s, there was this guy who was a doctor. He had his PhD in being a piece of fucking shit. His
Of
name was
course.
Samuel Cartwright. And he invented a disease that he would declare as a disability called drapetomania.
Oh, big words.
Yeah, it was a disease that he said caused enslaved people to want freedom.
Wow, what a crazy concept.
Yeah. So wanting basic human rights?
Can't do
Said
that.
no.
Yeah.
And then, of course, people with uteruses in the 1800s who experienced trauma, depression, or just opinions were labeled with the well known disability called hysteria. And the cures for hysteria included ice baths, hysterectomies, orgasms via 19th century vibrators operated by the doctor, bed rest,
I could see a lot of uterus holders lining up for that one special treatment.
bed rest.
Yeah, that or just like going to the doctor to get off and then you go home and you're good to go.
I don't know, man. Imagine going to the doctor and being like, I have anxiety, and them just ripping out your uterus and throwing you in ice water.
Yeah, that's probably what I would get, not the good vibrator.
Yeah, with my luck.
Yeah.
The 1800s were a fun time to have a uterus.
Yeah.
And then probably one of the most triggering ages, in my opinion, is the golden age of eugenics, which was the 1900s. In 1907, Indiana became the first US state to pass a law allowing the forced sterilization of disabled people.
Of course, because you don't want them multiplying.
Right. Pretty soon after that, 30 states followed. If you can't cure them, snip them out of the gene pool. That's eugenics, baby. Um, by 1930, sterilization was being done without consent to people considered feeble minded, so poor, disabled, or undesirable. Yeah, and unfortunately in situations like actually did a research paper with one of my old clients on this for their college exam. And I did a shit ton of research on it, and there was so many accounts of people taking advantage of people's language barriers
Right.
and like the not conformed consent. And it just is so so sad.
So for like undesirables, if you're and what's crazy to me is I can totally see this happening. Like you're married, you think that everything's great, your husband finds someone younger or better. Like can he just take you to them and just be like she's crazy, she has hysteria and
Yeah.
off you go?
I mean, yeah, there's no telling how many times that probably did happen.
That's insane.
Yeah. Yeah, because bonus points if you had a uterus or you were a person of color.
Right.
And then uh, before that started, there was something going on called Buck v. Bell. That's when the Supreme Court rules that forced sterilization was a-okay. Justice Holmes actually was stated saying 3 generations of imbeciles are enough.
Oh,
Yeah,
I wonder how he got to the number 3.
right. Yeah, it's interesting. And then after that, Nazi Germany later used American eugenics programs as a blueprint for their own. So they made the good old T4 program. And in that program, over 275,000 disabled people were murdered. Yeah, good job. We were the inspiration for Nazis.
Yeah. Go
But
us.
yeah, gold star. But I will say, after that, I'm not going to say things are great now, but after that is when you get the Rehabilitation Act, the ADA Act. But as we'll continue to talk about, that uh, studies still show to this day that minorities and people with uteruses still struggle
Right.
with getting diagnosed, let alone providing or receiving resources while living day to day with disabilities.
Yes. So yeah, that's like and that's something that I've dealt with a lot myself. Is, going to doctors and being gaslit or because I'm 5'2", I should only weigh 115 pounds or 110 pounds according to the outdated BMI chart that even the doctors will tell you is stupid or outdated, but yet I still have obese marked in my chart as a diagnosis. So I get told, "Oh, well you just need to lose weight and, just take this pill. I think you're just anxious." So there's a lot of gaslighting with doctors. So it takes some time to like shop around. And that's something new that I've learned. Like you can ask for second opinions and you can ask for third opinions. If you do your research, like what I would recommend doing is going into like Chat GPT or finding like a symptom tracker online that'll do like an AI search. And I typed in all of my symptoms, and like 4 of them that I actually ended up getting diagnosed with popped up. And I just basically went through each of the diagnoses that it showed were possibilities based on all of my symptoms. And I looked them up and I did so much research on them. And I was able to either rule it out as, okay, I don't think this applies to me, or be able to say, I think this is a possibility and why, and write it down. Um, because the gaslighting is unreal. And unfortunately, the other thing that I have learned is if you are a uterus holder and you go to that appointment alone, you will not be taken seriously. I can't tell you how many times like I would go to the doctor without Andrew and they would blow me off. And then I would come home upset telling him and he's like, they couldn't have done that. Like that's absurd. Like
Mhm.
why would a doctor do that? And then he started going to appointments with me and he was just like, "Oh my god, like this is insane." Um, and it's unfortunate, like, you have to have a male with you as a uterus holder to be taken seriously. Um, but one of the downsides of being disabled is it basically is meant to keep you in poverty because you have to factor, like, depending on your disability, if you need medical equipment or if you have a lot of medications, they're so expensive, even with copays. You have to make sure that you have a ride to your doctor's office if you need a caregiver, and then just your normal day-to-day bills. So it's definitely meant, I think, to keep you in poverty. And I think that society as a whole will definitely judge you, especially if you're getting SSI or SSDI, like disability from the government. They will definitely judge you because it'll be like, okay, if you're so disabled that you need checks from the government to survive, why are you getting your nails done? Why are you getting your hair
Yeah.
done? Why are you buying junk food? And it's ridiculous because it's almost like just because you're disabled, you should have to stay in this like poverty box where you're not allowed to do anything nice for yourself. Um, which is incredibly frustrating because self-care is so important, and it's even more so important in my mind if you have a disability because it's so easy to get swallowed up by everything going on and the multiple appointments and specialists and everything else that you have to keep up with and keep fighting. Um, and then it can also keep you in an emotional isolation. Like if you don't have a good support system, if you don't have friends that are willing to come over on days that you're not feeling well, you can start getting into that depressive state, um, which can really do a number on you. And then you do end up needing the pills and everything else that the doctors initially tried to throw at you. Um, but
Yeah, that's why you just get a friend like me who's a homebody, but not in my home.
right.
I don't want to be home in my home. I want to be in your home.
Right, which I loved because I didn't wanna leave my home, so it was great. It worked out perfect because the kids got to play and you and I just got to, like, either sit and exist in the same room and, like, you're on your phone and I'm on mine, or just, like, hanging out, doing our hair because, the mental health gods do demand sacrifices.
Yes, absolutely.
So, that's definitely important. Um But I did want to touch on if you do decide to file for disability. It's something that it took me a little while to come to terms with because realizing that you're going from like a walker, a rollator, a cane, or crutches to maybe even a wheelchair and not being able to leave your house, that really takes a toll on your brain. And it took me a little while and a few people saying, maybe you should try because I was having a hard time working. The migraines would start or I would have to lay down because the fatigue is so unreal. And I hate when you're talking to somebody and you're like, oh my God, my fatigue is really bad, or like, I'm so exhausted. And they're like, oh, I know I stayed up late watching this movie. And it's like, not trying to take away from like their feelings, but I'm like, dude, you don't even understand the half of what a chronic illness fatigue is.
Feels like. Hmm.
It's this whole other thing. But disability can take years. And that's another reason why I say that it's meant to keep you in poverty because if you're filing for SSI, um, you can't have over a certain amount of money in your bank account, um, just because you'll lose your benefits. And for SSDI, um, the Social Security Disability, um, you know, you can make some money, but it
It's
um,
limited on how much money that you can get. There's a specific cap per, is it per family or like family member? Like it is
yes.
for like food stamps and stuff like that.
Right. So the earning cap for someone receiving SSDI is you can't make more than $1,620 a month.
Okay. Wow. That's not even
You can't
gonna
even pay
cover
your
rent.
rent with that.
Yeah.
Right.
Wow.
So you have to make sure that you don't go over that. So you can't work any overtime. You can't try to pick up a shift. Like you can only make that much money per month. And then for SSI, the limit is $967 that you can keep in your account. And if you go over that, and once you file and they're giving you payments, they have full rights and access to your bank account
Yeah.
and they can randomly check it. So that autonomy is gone.
Stripped. Yep.
Um,
Completely stripped.
right. Like you get none of that. Um, and there are people that don't get like the majority of people when they get finally do get approved for like SSDI or SSI is so low. So for SSI, your benefit amount for like per person is like $943.
Jeez.
Um and then if it's an eligible couple, meaning both of you combined don't earn more than their cap, it's $1,415. That doesn't pay your rent, that doesn't pay your groceries, it's not
Jeez.
going to pay your utilities.
Fuck no.
And in 2025, they're projecting that the average SSDI payment for an individual is expected to be up to $1,580.
Maybe.
Right. And that's only if you had high earnings because they take a percentage of what you were earning.
Jeez.
So it can definitely be very difficult because, if you are getting benefits from the state, I mean, you're not getting much to pay for your medical. Not everybody qualifies. So if I get allotted my benefits for Social Security disability, um, I one they can check my bank account as they see fit. Um, I have to get recertified um, every 2 to 3 years, depending on what the judge decides. If you hire an attorney, like I did, you don't pay up front, which is amazing because who has that money sitting around when you can't work?
Right. Right.
Um, but they get a percentage. And it used to be up to $7,200, but now it's a little over $9,000 that they can take from your back pay. And
Jeez.
that's money, like if you had to go into debt, like let's say you had to modify your home to fit your needs. Um, or any other kind of debt that you went into not being able to work, a huge chunk is going to lawyers who a lot of times, if it doesn't even go to trial, all they did was sit there and help send something, a form or a paper to your disability contact. So it's really frustrating when it comes to disability. And, again, when people find out that you're on disability, apparently that means that you can no longer have a cell phone because if you can pay for a cell phone, why can't you pay for your rent? When
Right.
cell phones are so much cheaper. Um, so it's incredibly frustrating.
Yeah.
Um, but
Absolutely.
I will add that if you do end up with being diagnosed and you get to that part of the cycle, do your research with the ADA and what the laws are, what you're entitled to, because it's a lot more than most people think, especially when you're renting. We live on base and they put us in a 1-story house after we sat on a wait list and got pushed around. They told us that we were eligible for all of these modifications because this is not an ADA home. And then when we started requesting those modifications, they were pushing back. They didn't want to have to do it. And it wasn't really until I got the military housing side involved and then threatened to call the ADA and file a formal complaint that they were willing to come in and do things like widen doorways. I think it's 36 inches is considered an ADA like doorway. And just putting like grab rails and the things that I needed. Um,
Accommodations that
right,
that they're required to provide for you.
exactly. So definitely learn what your rights are. And
Absolutely.
if you have a service animal, learn your rights about where your service animal can be. Um, and keep little cards on you so that because we've all seen those videos of stores denying a service dog access. And I know, like for me, I'm in a wheelchair. Thankfully, my house wheelchair is like 400 pounds, but I have to have a smaller one that I travel with. And I know a lot of people in manual wheelchairs, it's frustrating when you're out because there are people that feel so entitled that they will literally move your wheelchair out of their way when you're out shopping.
The
And
balls.
yeah. And I'm like, I could never fathom like grabbing somebody's wheelchair and moving them. Like that's an extension of their body.
Bro, I can't even ask for ranch at a restaurant. Like,
Right.
I'm not gonna I'm not
Right.
gonna move somebody's wheelchair. What the fuck? That's
Yeah.
crazy.
It's
That's crazy.
insane.
But I think that, like, you're really spitting facts whenever you say, this system is not built for disabled folks. It's just not. It's built to keep people in poverty.
Yeah.
It it is built to oppress, and if it's and I always think this, and not to like take away from my own things that like I've struggled with, and like, you know, stuff like that, but I always think about how difficult it is for people of color who are
Right.
suffering through this, and like the district, because keeping it also like acknowledging the struggles that we're going through, and also like keeping it intersectional and remembering that, like, fuck, how disproportionately like worse is it for those people of color, especially women, like people with uteruses of color, like how much more stressful and difficult is it. I know that are indigenous communities have the highest rates of disability and the lowest access to diagnoses and services.
Oh yeah.
That's
You
crazy.
you have to have the spoons to even fight. It took me a year
Okay.
just to get my Ehlers-Danlos diagnosis, which is a rare genetic disease where, basically my ligaments are like spaghetti because of my collagen. And it's not that I can't just take a collagen pill or supplement and it's better. It's my brain is making all of the collagen that my body should need. It just has the wrong recipe.
Yeah.
So there's no curing that. And there's no official diagnosis like criteria. It's a diagnosis of exclusion. So you have to go through all of this stuff, and there's so many other illnesses that are the same way.
And that's something that has to be talked about. That is something that people do not tell you, that whenever you are, because we just I know, you and I have had the conversation. Whenever I got diagnosed with a couple of the things that I have been suffering with, we genuinely thought for a year, for the past last year, for a whole year, doctors were poking and prodding me for a whole year trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And for like 9 months, everybody was thinking Parkinson's. What the fuck? I am in my 20s. Please. Please. I'm sitting here trying to make 10-year plans and shit. But you're correct. It is exclusion. We have to make sure that it's not Parkinson's. And it luckily, thankfully, it was not Parkinson's. Um, but it was something, and it is not great. So, but that is exactly correct. I also want to state this, and since this is kind of um like happening in today's, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't bring this up when we're talking about disabilities. if I didn't shed some light on some struggles and communities that we hold dear, that when we're talking about people that disabilities, where, a lot of these disabilities that we are currently talking about are, these neurological or chronic pain. Disabilities also don't always look like that. Disabilities sometimes can also look like autism. And right now, there's a huge attack on the autism community
Oh my God.
from political figures. I, like I said, would be completely remiss if I didn't go on record saying, please, please, please shut the fuck up about Andrew Wakefield's bullshit about vaccines causing autism. It was a 13-person study that was redacted. He lost his license doing it.
Right.
Genuinely, genuinely, genuinely quit. It is so dangerous. We have diseases that kids are dying from now because people aren't vaccinating their kids. This is terrifying rhetoric. The reason why we're seeing more ADHD or autism diagnoses is why? Better research.
Yep.
Better research. We're taking it seriously. We know what we're doing now.
Right.
That's why. A ADHD and autism have always been here. It's why your grandpa has a whole big train collection.
Right.
You know?
I hate when people say, well, we didn't have all this in my time. And it's like, you did. You called them quirky. You made different cutesy names for why they were the way they were.
Yes.
It was, you just need to discipline your children better and all of these things. And it's like, autism and ADHD have been around for a long time. You just,
Absolutely.
the research wasn't there. The funding for researching wasn't there, and it wasn't taken seriously for a while.
Absolutely, and like most things going on in the world, like, other issues that we're fighting, I mean, you can say the same about anything in the medical community. The science is just better, the research is just better, the diagnosis criteria is we just know more about medical research now. So
Right.
therefore, more people are getting diagnosed with more things. It's easier to be able to receive diagnoses that we need. Research has given us better help. We're advancing better. I mean, look at where ABA therapy is now versus ABA therapy whenever I was a kid, and
I
it
was
being
terrified to start Indian ABA therapy because all I've heard from the autistic community was how damaging ABA therapy is.
yeah.
And I was terrified. But he's actually getting ABA therapy, and they asked, "Well, do you want to go somewhere and do it, or do you want to do it at home?" And I'm like, "At home," because I was like geared up and ready to like fight somebody.
Yeah, absolutely.
And for us, we've been lucky enough to have an RBT who's amazing with him and has really bonded with him. Um, I know that that's not always the case. Um,
Right. Yeah. But that's with anything.
yeah,
Bad apples are everywhere.
but yeah, to every field, you've got somebody.
I I know now we've got better words, we've got better science, and we still have the same ugly problem. If you're poor, not white, or you have a uterus, good luck getting your anything taken seriously.
Right.
Um,
I do want to add also, like, I want to make sure that I say this because the one thing that has worked for me when fighting for my diagnosis and trying to find out what's wrong with me, I did a lot of Google research and I actually learned a lot from TikTok. I'm not sure how I managed to get on the chronic illness side of TikTok, but I'm
algorithms be like that.
grateful. Right. But I'm so grateful that I did. One of the things that I've learned, and even my dad has told me this, is, you know, if you've done your research and you come in there and you say you want these tests done and you want these scans done and they refuse, you can tell them, great, put that in my chart that you refuse to do X, Y, Z,
Yeah.
because they're not going to want to put that in there. They're not going to want to, they can't say 100% that it's not something if they don't even test for it. Um, so, most of the time, you'll find that they'll cave and they'll be like, fine, but nothing's going to come from it. And it's like, okay, great, but let's rule this out. It's a lot of advocating for yourself. And I know that people of color and minorities and stuff like that, will, if they, Darwin forbid, they have chronic pain syndrome, you
Oh, yeah.
know, it's just you're drug seeking. And
Absolutely.
it's just not the same level of care that white people have. And we all have our struggles, but I definitely think that minorities have it way harder.
Yeah, for sure. And then especially like if you don't fit the acceptable disabled narrative, like the neat, tidy, inspirational, like non-threatening,
Yeah.
right? Because I think the truth is that like society loves disabled people when it's convenient.
When it
Like,
looks pretty.
yeah, exactly.
Um, because, well, my son, my 8-year-old, you know, we, it felt like we had a problem last year with one of his teachers. Um, I went in and I explained, that he has ADHD, he's autistic, we have sensory processing, and then he has something called ARFID, avoidance restrictive intake food disorder. And certain smells, textures, or even looking at something will make him gag and vomit.
Absolutely.
And you know, she was like, "Oh my God, that's so crazy. My nephew has all those problems. I know all about it. Everything's fine." Well, then, as soon as the school year started and she got to see what that looks like in school, all of the sudden, we started having a lot of problems. And I will say, to her credit, I sent her some articles and video clips of what autism and ADHD looks like in school. And she actually read them and she did her research, and we ended up having a really great year with her. Um, and now I think she's an amazing teacher. It's not often that you find somebody who is willing to be educated, um, which is very frustrating.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. We have Van who has ARFID, and then we have the opposite sides of the spectrum.
Right.
We have Van who has ARFID, who eats three things,
Yeah.
and then Vinny who has pica, who eats
Everything.
everything. And putting them in school was fun.
Oh, I
But
bet.
we are very lucky to be in an area that has a lot of resources for them, and their teachers have been I'm very privileged to have great resources, and to work in this field as well has given me kind of like a bird's eye view of what is available. And so
Yeah.
being able to navigate this world with kids who do, suffer with disabilities, I am able to, get them all the help that they need, and I just know what's out there. So I was able to get them in the right places, the right schools, like finding the magnet programs and stuff like that in St. Louis, and the
Yeah.
exact school that was perfect for autism. It was a win for me,
Yeah.
a huge win.
And I know that right now there's some crazy things happening, um, that, um, politically, with autistic children being called diseased, and the Department of Education and everything that's happening with that. And it's terrifying.
It
Um,
is.
I will say that I am glad that we live in California for right now, because I think that we will be fortunate enough to be sheltered from a lot of things. Because Gavin Newsom has basically come out and said, fuck you.
Absolutely. Yeah, he's a
Um,
treasure.
Yeah, he's definitely leading the way. And I talked to my 8-year-old's therapist a lot, and I would bounce things off of her, and she was like, yes, that is what they're saying, but it's going to take a while before it trickles down to California, just because it is such a democratic state. And i I think it's amazing that Gavin Newsom is the one in charge, because he's really trying to help keep things going for as long as he can. Um, so, with IEPs and, behaviors and stuff like that, we have been very fortunate.
I'm glad I live in a red state, so fuck.
Yeah. And, with Andrew retiring in a couple of years, like, the time frame is like, oh my God, where do we move? And there's only so many blue states that, we can live in. Um, that meet the rest of our criteria, because our kids are, their education is so important, and then
Yeah, for
also
sure.
access to my medical care that I'll need. um you know it's going to be really difficult, because for as much as I've been fighting, it's been a little over a year that I've been fighting. um you know I think that in any other state it most definitely would have taken longer.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Absolutely.
Military doctors don't exactly help things.
Are you sure?
But yeah, they're great. They're wonderful.
That's funny.
I love when people are like, "Well, yeah, but you have free insurance." And I'm like, "Well, technically we do pay a small amount for it." And they're like, "Well, yeah, but, it's nothing compared to the civilian side." And I do agree with that, wholeheartedly. And I'm like, "But it's not free, because dude man's never home."
Dude, man's never home.
Nope. So I'm like, and our quality of care, it sucks. We In September, I had this really horrible myoclonic episode that left it to where I could not walk and I could barely move my legs. Um, or my arms, I should say. And after being in the hospital for 10 days with them, they had no answers, no idea of what happened, and they discharged me not being able to walk, with no equipment, no anything. And we had like a 3-hour window. Um, So, Andrew and I talk about, it's probably better at this point to just go off base, because these hospitals that are for profit are so happy to like run up your insurance bill and test for everything and anything. Um, so I definitely get frustrated with that, because you shouldn't have to fight. There were times that I had to take breaks from fighting for referrals and this, that, and the other with it, because, you only have so many spoons when you're chronically ill.
Yeah.
Um, and I had to take a couple breaks in between, and doctors looked at me like, oh, well, see, it can't be that bad. And it's like, no, there were plenty of days that my pain was at like an 8 or a 9, but I would rather just stay home instead of having you gaslight me.
Yeah, absolutely. I suffer with a disability called, well, disability is FND, but one of the symptoms of it is spasmodic torticollis, which is literally I'd rather have like 12 more children back to back than go through. Spasmodic torticollis is the most painful thing I've ever experienced in my life, and it makes the whole right side of my body stop working for a good week.
That's
Um,
always fun.
yeah, and there are sometimes just because of the trauma that I've had of being like you said, gaslit by doctors of, well, maybe it's just like a crick in your neck, or that's how it started off, was a crick in your neck. Um,
Right.
and it's like this huge spasm that like starts trickling down the whole right side of my body, And I'm sitting here like, maybe I'm fucking crazy because
Right?
I feel like I'm dying and I am being told that I'm fine. And it just such an
Right.
odd feeling because you're like, are you sure? Because I feel like I'm in a lot of pain right now. Uh,
Right?
but there would be times where instead of going through all of that, I would just like thug through it, like thug it out
Yeah.
for sure. With torticollis, you can't because it doesn't go away until you
Right.
take, the medication for it and stuff like that. Which now I get regular shots for it and stuff like that. It only flares up when I'm stressed, but I mean, it just genuinely, I would have rather stayed at home than go and be told that my pain isn't real. But
Right.
I found a doctor who was a female.
Yeah.
Surprise. And I'll never forget whenever she, put her hand on my back and was like, "Oh my god, you must be in so much pain."
Yes.
And the feeling of just like that was so validating. I genuinely cried.
Yeah.
I cried because I was like, "You have no idea how much that means to me because yeah, I'm dying." And she's like, "This is down like the whole you're." She's like, "When you say you can't feel your fingers, this is why." And she started like breaking it down for me and I was just like, "Is this a dream?" It was so
Right?
crazy.
Yeah. It definitely is. And like, we've decided that we're not going to be using military hospital that's on base. One of the times that I was having a myoclonic episode, so it would start in my back, and the tremors and the spasms would get so bad that it looked like I was having a seizure on my lower half. And the pain that comes with your muscles being so tight for so long. And, he took me to the ER, and, you know, this was before I had a myoclonic diagnosis or dystonia and all these other things. And, they actually tried to admit me to their psych ward
Yep. I'm not
because they
surprised.
said, well, all your labs look fine. This must be anxiety. And they separated Andrew and I. They put me in the little tiny crazy room. Um, and they told me that I'm not supposed to call it that because that's not what it is. But they took all my belongings, put me in paper scrubs. I was able to text Andrew quick enough before they took my phone to tell him what was going on. Um, and they hadn't given me any kind of muscle relaxer or anything to stop the jerks.
Yeah.
And they were determined and hell-bent that I needed to be admitted upstairs. So they called the social worker from upstairs. Well, when you're in those tiny little rooms, they usually have somebody sitting in your doorway to babysit you
Yeah, for
and
sure.
make sure that, you don't hurt yourself or anything like that. And my babysitter, because I've learned enough, I was fortunate enough to find a Facebook group that was actually very knowledgeable and put out a lot of information. Um, And I asked him, I said, so, which unit are you from? And he was like, oh, x ray. And I was like, did you draw the short straw or are you just the newest one in? And he's like,
Mhm.
oh, no, no, no. I'm just here helping out, because, you need a
You're
little
just
help.
do
And I was
scut
like,
work.
right. I'm like, so did you draw the short straw or is it because you're so new? And he admitted, he was like, well, it's just because I'm so new. They didn't really need me. And I was like, oh. So every time I went to scratch like my head or my face or my arm, like he would jerk in his chair and like look at me like I was about to do something like crazy off the walls.
Yeah.
Because here's this, what he's told, crazy person basically, just sitting quietly, shaking and having tremors, but, just doing nothing crazy. And then I got a next door neighbor, which was really fun. Because, well, I take that back. It wasn't fun. He was truly having a crisis. And I do wholeheartedly hope that he ended up getting the proper help that he needed. but I could hear him screaming from next door, "I just want to be happy. I just want to feel alive." He's like, "Why is that so hard?" And I was like, "Yeah, you tell him."
Yeah.
And my babysitter was like, "No, no, no, you can't do that. You can't instigate." So it would get quiet for a minute, and I would just be like, "Marco." And he'd be over there and be like, "Polo." So here's, the two crazy people just sitting there. Um, but thankfully, the social worker was like, "Why are you here?" And I was like,
Right.
"I don't fucking know." So, yeah, I've had some wild experiences and stuff like that in hospitals. And I think especially military hospitals because they don't see so much that when they do finally see something that could be different and
Yeah.
not normal, they get a little too excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that kind of goes into, um, again, it's not even just about getting into the doctor, it's about getting the doctor to believe you.
Yes. I've been fortunate after 4 doctors. They changed my primary care manager, which is my doctor, for like the fifth time, which is normal in the military world. But the doctor that I have right now, it's Captain Aravello, and I'm only saying his name because I have nothing but amazing things to say about him. He actually looked up Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and myoclonic disorder and the other diagnoses that I have that he wasn't familiar with. He actually did research before my appointment with him. And he'll just ask questions of like, "So tell me how it affects you in this way." But it's not because he's trying to find a fault. He genuinely wants to know.
Yeah.
Um, so somehow I got lucky in that aspect of finally getting a doctor that will listen to me.
We all deserve a doctor who will listen to us.
And
I'm
that's how,
surprised. I'm surprised yours is a man.
right, right. But I think it's honestly, I think it's because he's so young. And I
That's
think
valid.
once you start getting those older doctors, like they're jaded, they're tired, like they've seen it all and heard it all apparently, and they have that god complex where maybe these younger doctors won't have that.
There's also just so many sexist and racist backings of old medicine that a lot of these doctors follow still.
Yeah, they do. um
Disabilities.
and a friend of mine told me, and I've heard it said a lot of times, so like for Ehlers-Danlos, the our little logo is a rainbow zebra. um because I guess a lot of doctors are told that if it looks like a horse and it sounds like a horse, don't go looking for something different.
Hmm.
And, a lot of rare disorders fall into that same category because, doctors are only doing quick analysis. They're not taking the time to do the digging.
Right.
But it's definitely frustrating. But there
I
is
think
hope.
there is hope. I mean, we have been pushing and pushing since the 90s with the ADA Act. I mean, even before then, I'm sure there was advocacy, and it only gets better and bigger, and marginalized people have always found workarounds genuinely,
Right.
whether it's starting protests or healing circles or calling out ableist nonsense.
Right.
With I We'll always be here. We've always been here,
Right.
and we'll continue to help each other out. The system was not built for us, but we are gonna make sure that we're constantly requesting accommodations until it's DIY'd for us.
Right. And you know what kills me is like the people who are like, "Oh, what more do disabled people need?" Well, if you're using an elevator, that was not meant for you. That was absolutely not meant for you. That was meant for disabled people. If you're choosing to use the door at the store, that opens automatically, again, that was meant for disabled people, not you. So it's like all these ableist people that use and get to utilize on a daily basis things that were created initially for people with disabilities. You know, I think they forget that something as simple as an elevator, that was meant for disabled people. Um, but I think that finding a good community, even if it's online, even if it's on Facebook, is so important so that you're not just like self isolating and just advocating as hard as you can for yourself. It's exhausting, it's anger inducing, but you can almost try to use that as fuel.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Feel like one of the things that I like to always say is all of this anger that you're feeling, please keep it, have it. Hold it
Right.
in your hand, look at it. You are a victim and you're allowed to be a victim, and there's nothing wrong with being a victim. But what I will say is what you do with that anger and what you do with those feelings, let them be productive.
Right.
Let's make it
Exactly.
productive. You're allowed to be upset, you're allowed to be angry, and you're allowed to feel those feelings and have the reactions that you deserve. And then let's be productive
Right.
with our anger.
Exactly. And I recently received a diagnosis, and I remember telling you, and you're like, "Well, how do you feel?" And I'm like, "Well, I'm angry and I'm sad, and it's not what I was looking for." And you told me the same thing, it's okay, you're valid to feel those feelings. And I'm kind of getting to the point now where I'm like, "Okay, what am I going to do about it? Or am I just going to sit here and just take it, or am I going to start fighting back and bugging some more doctors and specialists?"
Making sure that
Uh,
you get the care that you deserve.
exactly. And I think that for anybody out there that might feel like they're alone, start looking for Facebook groups. I know that sounds crazy and I know that sounds stupid, but start looking for these chronically ill groups. Um, and you know what? You got us too. We'll help you all along. You can send messages or make send us comments, leave us notes, and we'll be happy to try to address it and be your support system as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's our horror story for today. But unlike the Middle Ages, we can actually fix it if we choose to. And if you liked today's episode, share it, rate it, scream it into the void, whatever works. And until next time, stay angry and maybe stay moist, according to 1487 science.
Definitely stay moist.
Bye.
Bye.